And greetings to everyone out in Zoom land, although this is Hop In land. It's a little different. First time we've used this, I've used this system, but so far so good. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to chair the session of the China Career Summit. Some of you may know that that's a program that began 3 years ago at the U.S. China Strong Foundation, where I was president at the time. And we hope that we'll learn something over the course of these 2 days that will help you plan and implement your own careers in the China field. So we've got, this panel is actually the best of all the panels. Just wanted you to know that. We've got a stellar group of experienced people who bring multiple generations of China experience to the conversation. And I'll just say one little thing about myself. I began learning Chinese in 1971, which was half a century ago. First traveled to China in 1974, and I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest guy in the group here. So, but I promise that I won't ilao mai lao. We'll hopefully not go in that direction. So, let's lead off. We're going to do this in alphabetical order. Leading off with Craig Allen. Craig's an old friend and comrade in arms. He's the president of the U.S. China Business Council, one of the most important positions in the U.S. China sphere. He's began his government career in 1985 at the Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration. He entered government as a presidential management intern, very prestigious entry point. And from 1986 to 88 was an international economist at the ITA's China office. He then went to AIT, the American Institute in Taiwan, where he was director of the American Trade Center. And he was there till 1992, and then went to the our embassy in Beijing as commercial attaché. He was assigned to the embassy in Tokyo, and then promoted in 1998 to Deputy Senior Commercial Officer. I think I want you to hear this, Craig's career experience, because it is relevant to this conversation. And because Craig isn't a young chicken anymore, it's a long resume. I won't go through every bit of it. So in 2000, Craig spent 2 years at the National Center for APEC in Seattle. Worked on summits in Brunei, China, and Mexico. Then 2002 was back to Beijing as senior commercial officer, promoted then to minister counselor. And then after a 4-year tour in South Africa, which may be considered time off for good behavior, I don't know, Craig became Deputy Assistant Secretary for Asia at the Department of Commerce's ITA again. And he was DAS, Deputy Assistant Secretary for China. Subsequent to that, he was promoted to be our ambassador to Brunei Darussalam, and so we should really refer to him as Ambassador Allen. I'm very pleased to do that. And then he moved to the U.S. China Business Council, where he has been working tirelessly to advance U.S. China economic interests, U.S. economic interests vis-a-vis China. And I should note that it's not irrelevant that Craig is a marathoner, because I think that is a skill and an attribute that's very much needed in the China field today. So, Craig, welcome to this panel. It's great to see you, and I'm looking forward to see you next week in D.C. Now, you've worked, Craig, in the government sector and now for a business organization. Tell us maybe one of the highlights of your career as a bridge builder. And is the same sort of opportunity available today to young people?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, John, and what an honor to be here. I have enjoyed a career as a bridge builder for many, many years. And I have to recognize that it's much more difficult to build bridges in this environment than it was certainly 20, 30 years ago. But that's not to say that the bridges are going out of business at all. And perhaps while we're less busy building bridges, there's an awful good living to be made in maintaining bridges or repairing bridges or supporting bridges. All of these are good businesses. So at the USCBC, we advocate on behalf of American companies doing business in China. And I would have to say that despite all the political theater between Republicans and Democrats, between security officials and economists, beyond all that political theater, American companies are actually doing very well in China for the most part. In trade is strong, investment is strong. Some 95% of our 260 members are profitable. China will represent a good percentage of global growth in the future. With Jonathan on, I'm not sure I should say 30%. I don't know that he would agree with that, but I think it's a large percentage of global growth in the future. And so American companies are going nowhere. Those bridges are built and traffic is going over them. So I would say, you need to break it down sector by sector. Consumer goods are great. Ag is great. Financial services are growing very rapidly. Energy, great. Most manufactured sectors, great. Other services, great. The real challenges are in the tech sector. And there, the perceptions of national control and export controls and sanctions and licensing is absolutely had a major impact. But the good news there for careers, young people looking to build their careers, is that the tech sector between the U.S. and China is highly interdependent, synergistic, and is going to carry on collaborating. But to do so lawfully in both countries is going to need to increase the numbers of people engaged in compliance. So these are all growth industries. The U.S. and China are both growing rapidly. American companies are in China forever, for good, and they need good people. So while the bridge building business is getting harder and harder, the bridge maintenance, repair, and expansion business is fantastic, John. And nobody knows that better than you. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. I think you've teased a lot out of that metaphor of bridges, and I've learned a lot from that. It's very helpful. Thank you. Before introducing our next speaker, I just want to remind those in the audience that you're welcome to put questions up on the Q&A panel here on the right side of your screen. I think it's the right side of your screen, and we'll do our best to try to address them. I'm now pleased to introduce my old friend Joel Backaler. Joel, if I butchered your name, I apologize. But
that's fine.
Yeah, how do you pronounce it?
Backaler.
Well, I got it pretty close. All right, good. Who's managing director of FrontierView. Joel is, from my vantage point, a member of the younger generation, but he's already built a heck of a career in China. FrontierView is a global macroeconomic and multinational business-focused market intelligence firm. Joel is a member of the National Committee on U.S. China Relations, and he's I think most notably, the author of the book you can see right behind his head there. It's called China Goes West. It came out a few years ago. It's an excellent read. Joel's advised hundreds of multinational corporations on their international business strategy and has testified before the U.S. China Economic and Security Review Commission. He had a Fulbright in Taiwan and then did advanced Mandarin study at Tsinghua University. Was that the IUP program?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, that's when we first met. Anyway, but Joel has worked with Atos Consulting's China's state-owned enterprise practice in Beijing. And during his subsequent career with Frontier Strategy, he was part of the founding team of its Asia Pacific office in Singapore. Joel, it's great to have you. Great to see you. He's up in Boston, by the way. You went to China, Joel, to study, and you jumped in to work for a Chinese company. What did you learn from that, and what lessons can be drawn from that experience for young people today?
Yeah, thanks, John. It's great to be reconnected with many of you on the line. I'd say the number one thing that stuck out to me about that experience was that learning Mandarin was a skill that was valuable to have, but language skills alone don't necessarily guarantee early career success. I mean, that was my experience in Beijing after I finished IUP. And what I quickly discovered during my job search was that employers, they valued my Chinese language skills, but the language needed to be paired with a complementary set of business skills. So that could be sales or marketing or financial analysis, which was in stark contrast to what I had heard while I was studying Chinese as a college student or even post-grad, where like all my friends and family would tell me things like, oh, you speak Chinese, you're going to be like, have no issue finding a job, which was anything but the case. So what ended up happening was I had to be extremely proactive in my job search. So after class, when I was at IUP, I was taking the subway to the other side of Beijing to meet with people for coffee. I'd be flying to Shanghai regularly to get access to those business networks and try to get plugged in there. And then it was even to a point where I was showing up unannounced at offices with my resume in hand and just requesting to speak to a manager whose name I found online, which actually worked in one case. The end result of all this was I was able to convince the British practice lead for a multinational consulting company to take me on to join his Chinese local team. And they were restructuring a Chinese chemical company. But even then, after joining the team, I found my Chinese language and cultural understanding was really there. It was helpful for building bonds with my coworkers and the clients. But after work, when I wasn't with them, like eating hot pot or singing karaoke, I was back in my apartment, staying up late, studying like finance fundamentals, Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, trying to do everything I needed to really learn to do my job effectively. So I guess what I'm trying to say, I think in learning from that experience is it's definitely essential to have Chinese for the cultural understanding and being able to, operate successfully in a Chinese work environment. But I really think you need to work equally hard, if not harder, developing that practical, marketable set of skills that is really what employers are primarily hiring you for. So that's how I'd answer that.
Yeah, Joel, that's terrific advice. It's no longer enough. When I started out in the China field, I left a PhD program in medieval Chinese literature, and the only skill I had, I could walk on two legs and I could speak Chinese, and that was enough in 1980. To get a job, and a good one, actually. But things have changed. But the thing that I want you to take away from what Joel said a minute ago is Joel is a great networker. And by that, I mean he's somebody who works at it hard, but he's not annoying. There are people who can misuse this guanxi type of networking and become pains in the ass. And Joel is not one of those people. So if you get him offline, he can maybe share his tricks of the trade. Our third speaker is Alan Wei, who's executive director in the Americas of the Louis XIII private clients of Remy Cointreau USA. Alan is, we haven't met until just before the event. He's a veteran in the luxury marketing sector. He's an innovative business professional with over 20 years of diverse leadership experiences in Asian, American, and European countries. He's one of the few executives from mainland China. He's from Shanghai, by the way, who holds a senior position in a leading consumer luxury company. In 2015, Alan received the Outstanding 50 Asians in Business Award in New York. And Alan, I see a bottle of Remy Martin Cognac right behind you, or it may be the higher, but we won't go there. It's too early in the day. It's not even noon where I am in Tucson. So I wanted to ask you something because you've unusually worked for the same company now for nearly 17 years in both China and the U.S. What has that experience taught you about building bridges between East and West?
Thank you, John. Well, first thing first, I'm really inspired by those comments and the suggestions shared by Ambassador Alan and Joe. And I think it is important to, especially for the audience here, I think it is important to understand the foundation of bridge building, because without a solid foundation, there's no such thing. It's going to be collapsed. So I think it is so important to understand once you are in a foreign country, or if you had a conversation with a foreign personnel, make sure to be extremely open-minded. Do not assume what works in your hometown will also work in that particular country. Second, do not judge. Something doesn't make sense to you may have a good reason behind. So because you're talking about my business, so I share a little story. I still remember here in US, we have a very successful program called Buy the Glass. So basically you can order 1 ounce of Louis XIII in the bar or restaurant. But when I share this best practice with my Chinese colleagues, they are not a big fan of this program. Because in China, the customer won't have 100% confidence of the authenticity once the bottle being opened. So second opinion I want to share is to explore the differences, but at the same time looking for the common ground. I still remember I was quite surprised when we developed some promotional programs for this country. But actually, we will have to work with legal and the finance because 50 states have their own different tax rate and the legal restrictions that we have to comply with. But to remember, the only reason we have so-called a bridge is because you want to go from point A to point B, and I want to go from point B to point A. The third one, I think Joe just mentioned, prepare for the cultural shock. It is a shock at this moment or that moment, but in the long run, you will appreciate experiences of working abroad because it will broaden your horizon. The last one, I just want to make sure you need to ask yourself, are you ready for working in China? Joe, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this term. They call 669, 996, which means working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. Be prepared.
Thank you very much, Alan. That's good advice. Hopefully, we're going to slowly move away from 996 going forward. But yeah, it's a tough work environment, but very rewarding. And thank you for that terrific advice. Don't assume that what you know at home works. Be open-minded and don't judge. I think that's great advice for anybody doing business in a foreign country, or really anywhere. Last but not least, I'm pleased to introduce my good friend Jonathan Woetzel, who's actually worked for McKinsey for one company for longer than Alan's worked for Remy Cointreau, and it's at least 26 years, if my information is correct, Jonathan. He's senior partner with McKinsey. He is the global leader of its Cities Special Initiative. And if I'm not wrong, I think Jonathan actually designed that program initially, and that's he's a real innovative thinker about business. He's the Asia-based director of the McKinsey Global Institute. He publishes a lot. He's a great writer. He has led McKinsey's energy and materials practice in Asia, and is co-chair of the Urban China Initiative. As McKinsey's leader in developing its China practice, Dr. Woetzel opened the Shanghai location in 1995 and has been resident there since then. He's currently in Los Angeles on his way back to Shanghai shortly. He's worked in Hong Kong, Los Angeles, New York, and Zurich, and has extensive experience in developing strategies and organizations for both companies and government institutions, particularly in energy, mining, infrastructure, and airlines. And certainly McKinsey has been deeply embedded in China's development of its economy over those past 2 to 3 decades. And I'm delighted to welcome Jonathan to our panel. So just a very simple question. What would your advice be, Jonathan? Things have certainly changed, but what would your advice be to people now starting out their careers in China stuff?
Well, thanks, John. And first of all, I really pleasure, and I really agree with pretty much everything that Joel, Alan, Craig were saying. So I'm not going to try not to repeat it. But first of all, a message of optimism. So like, yeah, this is still a great job. You should go for it. That the party is just getting started, pun not intended. There's a long way to go here. So plenty of economic opportunity to shoot at. That's the first point. Secondly, you are, as a new person coming, as someone who's considering a China career, almost in many ways like a stranger in a strange land. Like you're embarking on a thing which is going to be challenging, which is not, you shouldn't expect to be easy. You should expect it to be harder than most careers, but with the rewards that accrue to people who do extraordinary things. So I liken it to migration. Migrants, generally speaking, outperform after a very tough moment, that they have to pick up and go, which means they actually have to rebuild a whole set of relationships that you have had since birth, which are no longer probably the ones that you will have going forward. So that's a non-trivial effort. You have to invest in it. You have to invest in yourself. You have to invest in skills and capabilities. So there is like investment, and investment means deferred consumption, as in things might not be so easy at the beginning, but they will get there if you've made the right calls and the right investments. And as I said, for point A, he's like, this is a good call. There are some really long-term trends here. So I would bet on it. And so, but it is an investment. And then the third point is that just the best way to make an investment is to be there. I like to tell people that China is a full body experience. We can talk at you for hours and hours about what it's like. Won't be worth as much as 5 minutes with you actually on the ground, realizing, oh, it's not the way I thought it was. So I just encourage you to go there, regardless of level of language preparation, though I agree having some makes your life personally much better, typically, especially after work. But I think that just being in the context, you pick up so much more about how things work. And of course, getting there means you also have to get there to do something. So bring a skill, bring a capability, bring a relationship. Otherwise, things will be harder than they need to be. So it's a great opportunity, though. That's my main message.
Great, that's terrific. Just let's talk a little bit about the language question, because I have sometimes given people advice if they're fairly well along in their Chinese language studies, and they have the opportunity to maybe invest one more year to really get it up to a new level where they can use it professionally in negotiations and so on. I think that's a good investment. Would anybody disagree with that, or think that's not a good idea? Alan, I see you want to comment about Chinese language?
Yeah, because I have to say, Chinese language probably is one of the most difficult language to master. It's a little bit more easier to speak than to read and write. So I feel like for the American kids to learn Chinese, it's way harder than we learn English. But to answer your question, I think it is so important to immerse yourself with a group of Chinese friends or colleagues, which will make your Chinese, improving way faster than just reading the book or follow the class.
Sure, I think that's true. There's lots of people have a lot of experience with how to learn Chinese in the best way. I did intensive second-year Chinese, and I said, this isn't intense enough. I got on a plane and I went to Taiwan, lived with the family, and didn't understand anything for a few months. But no, I think, well, that's something that this conference and Asia Society going forward is going to be in a good position to assist people if you have questions about Chinese language learning. I want to ask Craig a question now, because when we did the China Career Summit 3 years ago, a lot of the Americans in the audience were concerned about security clearances, because they saw from their vantage point coming out of university that there were a lot of opportunities in the U.S. government, and they were concerned about whether they should go to China, whether that would affect a security clearance or not. And Craig, you know a lot about this. What's your advice there?
Well, I wish that I could be rosier than I'm going to be on this subject. I think that those that have strong and sustained ties, particularly through family or through marriage to China, are going to have a more difficult time getting a security clearance. There have been many people who have been denied security clearances because of issues of having long-term relationships in China. So while it pains me to say it, it is not getting easier. And I would say during the Trump administration, there was a little bit of security clearances were given out here and there, and it was perhaps a little bit easier. The Biden administration is tightened up, and it's taking a long time, and people are getting their clearances slowly, if at all. So I think that a lot of work should be done by the State Department in this area because it, in my view, is not going well. Average clearance time could be 6 months to a year, but what I fear is many people are just not hearing back, and that is very deleterious if you're waiting for a job with the government or a job that requires a clearance. So the individual circumstances are very important, but if you have a close family member who is Chinese or in China, then I would say that the probabilities are not great. And it kills me to say that. I hate it, but I think that I must be honest. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I think that's very useful advice. But Joel, if you don't want to go into government, if you say, okay, I'm going to try to make my path through the Chinese business world, you have multinationals that do hire people to go and work on China. But on the ground today in China, if you're a young person with that interest, what opportunities are there?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, most multinational companies across industries, like Craig had laid out earlier, have like very large subsidiaries in China and Asia Pacific in general. So I think there's actually opportunities both on the ground and then also outside of China. I think that's one of the things that I don't think a lot of people realize is I've done a lot of research into Chinese companies going global, and also I see a massive diaspora population of Chinese entrepreneurs in the U.S. and Europe starting up various businesses as well at a smaller scale. And so I think there are ways to do business in China on the ground. There's also ways to do business with China within maybe your own cultural context and use your bridge building skills to maybe help a Chinese company with their soft landing in the United States in your hometown. I mean, a lot of these investments don't just happen in New York or in Los Angeles. They'll happen in rural areas like manufacturing hubs that require a lot of people that understand the local environment because there aren't as many U.S. China professionals there. So I think there's opportunities across industries on both sides. But I think the one thing I'd call out is, besides just applying for some multinationals, China operations, either locally or being posted there from global, is looking, what are some creative ways that you could do business with China in your home country or in other international markets to apply that expertise?
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Jonathan, I want to ask you, you've been there in China, you've watched expats come and go. In some cases, they're posted to China for technical reasons to help build a plant or get one commissioned. But you've also seen people just sink down their roots and get to know the place and be successful. Are there entrepreneurial positions? I mean, can you just go and start a business today in China? Is that something that people from abroad can envision, or is that too difficult?
So, I'm not sure asking a 35-year McKinsey consultant about being entrepreneurial is a good idea. But, let me reason from at least, I'm actually, okay, so let's just, breaking news. So yes, I am doing that. myself. So yes, it's absolutely possible. And many others have. So I think that, one's comfort with the context is the main thing. So you can get comfortable with or without language. Personally, I think having some language actually makes you more comfortable, just to build on that. But I know plenty of people who have atrocious Chinese and extremely successful entrepreneurial businesses in China. I think it's mostly about being comfortable in an unstructured environment and building the business skills to do so. Yes, is the short answer. And I think that there are lots of, happy to have a more specific.
So what are you going to be doing, Jonathan?
Well, I just think that this unfolding story, I'm an urbanist. So the way in which China is shaping and reshaping its built environment promises to have amazing opportunities for impact, both economic, social, and environmental now. And so being part of that as in putting capital to work to make a better built environment, I think that is an incredible opportunity to be part of. I feel very privileged as sort of having been an advisor and over the last decades. And at some point, I'm sure that at this point we'll turn into more of a practitioner. So.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. We have two very good questions from the audience, and I'd like to pose the first one, which is the question is, you raised how there will be a culture shock going to China due to differences in norms, but what are some of the similarities and common characteristics that you find important? Who'd like to take that? I think, Alan, you had talked about not bringing your assumptions or judging, but what are the common points between, say, Americans and Chinese? And what are the biggest differences? I know that you could write a book about this, but you don't have too much time. You have to be quick.
Okay. So you want to answer more differences or the similarity?
Whatever you think strikes your fancy.
Okay, I think especially for the American students here, it is so important to understand China society somehow, even today, it's still very hierarchy. This is so important to understand. So I give you one example again. I still remember when I joined the first meeting here. It's like a group meeting, a lot of people. And I was so surprised to see, because we have a ballroom, we only have 10 seats, okay? Others just standing there. And I just cannot believe one very junior American kid just sitting there. And one top leader just came late and is standing over there at the corner. It's not going to be happening. Never, ever in China. So this is something we have to bear in mind. This is part of China. We have to accept, understand. And this is another type of respect. If we understand this one and we use it smartly, it's going to be very helpful.
That's great advice. And it's something that doesn't come naturally to Americans. Even when you sort of intellectually understand it, we tend to have very bad habits that are hard to break. So that terrific answer. But there's to the questioner, there's a lot you could say about this subject, but that's a very good answer. The next question is directed to, it says, could you give some advice for Chinese students who want to take a China-related career in the U.S.? And I'm going to ask Alan to offer one, because you've essentially done that. What would your advice be? And I'll ask Craig to answer the same question. For someone who's from China and they want to work in the U.S. and play a role, what do they need to think about?
Me again?
Yeah, if you could.
Of course. Well, I think it is important to understand what kind of value you can bring to the table, right? If you are better understand this market itself or some technology pattern or know-how. Again, I think do not underestimate the challenge that we will have. Give you one example. Again, I try to tell the story. It's easy. I'm in the consumer business, and we are looking for a celebrity. And just try to imagine for any American kids, American students, for them, Li Bingbing and Fan Bingbing they cannot tell the differences. The name is the same, the profile, everything looks the same. The same challenge for me. I still remember the agency present me like 2 celebrities to choose from, and I cannot feel it. And this is some challenge, for the foreigners if you are not born here, grew up here. So my whole point is to understand what kind of true value you can bring to the table, and do not underestimate the challenge you could face.
Okay, terrific advice. Craig, your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, there are so many super Chinese professionals everywhere in cities all across the United States. In New York, there's a Chinese Financial Professionals Association, and it has thousands of members, and they're quantitative, they're systems, they're economists, they're accountants, there's actuaries, people with incredible credentials. And I think that that's really true throughout the urban areas of the United States. The Chinese young professionals with superb technical qualifications kind of nestling in and finding really good career prospects. So many have gone before, and many, by dint of their technical ability, technical expertise, have really found fantastic careers in the United States. And I really admire them for having been so successful, because it's not good luck, it's hard work and expertise that gets you there.
Great, thank you, Craig. We only have a few minutes left. In fact, I want to check with our organizer. Is it 5 minutes, or are we coming up to time? Well, we'll keep going until they pull the plug. I'm just going to open the floor to anyone who has any additional thoughts you'd like to communicate to young people. And I'll ask Jonathan first, because he's someone who's got a huge amount of experience, sees the big picture on China. Why should we be optimistic about the future?
That there are long-term trends here. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's in many ways you're seeing, a historic one-way event, and it's still got another 10 or 20 years to play out. We start from urbanization and sort of the movement of farm to factory. So I'll give the story of Mr. Xu to build on Alan's storytelling. Mr. Xu is our night watchman at our building in Shanghai. And so we got to know him over a bunch of years, and then he disappeared. And then he calls up about a year later and says, "Hey, I'd like to take you guys out to dinner, me and my wife." So we go out to dinner with Mr. Xu, and he said, "This is interesting. Why? A, how does he have the money? And B, why having dinner?" And so he wanted to have a discussion about his son, who was going to go to college in Guangdong. And his son had never, the first member of the family to go to college. And so it's like, should he study electrical engineering or computer science? And what would be the right choice? And then I asked him, so, well, how did he, and so interesting about, how about you? How are things going? He said, oh yeah, I was doing the night watchman job. I was saving in order to buy my car. So I got a car. So now I do a Kuai, so I do a courier service, and I bought an apartment, and I met my wife, and she's now getting married, and we're out in the countryside, but and he drops along the way. Oh, and then I started to read. So he was actually the first member of his family in thousands of years to read. And his son is the first member to go to college. All right. So that's what's going on here. You're getting 2,000 years of economic history just sort of pushed forward and jammed together. That's why you should be optimistic. When you get hundreds of millions of people who are learning to read and to work in a modern economy, all at the same time, for the first time ever, you're going to have an amazing story. So that's why you should be optimistic.
Okay, terrific. I'll ask you a real quick question. So the concerns that Scott Rozelle has out at Stanford about demographics and rural, underinvestment and so on, you think those are manageable?
I think that they're a challenge, but yes, I think there's more than enough money in the system. The question is, does the money go to the right place?
Yeah.
And that's what, I think this current debate about common prosperity is all about. And what is the mechanism that we use? I think it's genuine, the concern here. Just, Deng Xiaoping said it. It's fair for some places to people to get rich before others. But when they do, they have to turn around and help all the rest of them so we can ultimately become a harmonious society. Well, we're in the second half of that sentence right now, and let's see how it plays. I don't know. I mean, I think this is an uncertainty, but we can all engage on it, and I think we can as global people, as people who come from the U.S. We have ideas about what everybody's basic intrinsic human rights are and what they deserve, what we need in order to have a higher standard of living. So I actually believe, and I think for that matter, the Chinese government believes that foreign enterprises, foreign companies, foreign individuals have a particular role to play in providing the standard. And you can see that in the labor policies, let alone the tax policies. And so we have to actually enunciate that. And that is part of the things, to Alan's point, that I think we bring.
Terrific. So we've got a question that's just come in, and a couple of them, they're piling in here on us. And this one I'll turn to Joel. So once someone has the language and basic training and so on, what advice do you have for job seekers who may not have any networks? They're looking for a mid-level China-related jobs. Are there any secrets to this?
I don't think there's any secrets. I think there's just two paths to take. On one hand, it's go to China and network and try to build your path there, which can be hard. And it also could be challenging due to getting a visa and what premise you're actually going to be out there for an extended period of time. But the other way is, be here, be thoughtful about what industry you're choosing and get in with a company that either has ambitions to go to China or already is in China. Because I think for the large multinationals, they have highly localized operations at this point. They have very Chinese senior leadership across the board. But I deal with a lot of companies that are more small to medium sized at times, and they're just opening up their offices in Asia Pacific, either in Singapore or Shanghai. And I think those are the right types of companies to target, where they're ones that, they'll look at your ability to speak Chinese, and they won't care if you don't have a big network there. That you'll just be the China person, and they'll view that as an asset, as you just by nature you'd be the first person that they would go to explore that market. So I think, there definitely are opportunities to go to China, especially if you use Chinese language study as that initial way to get your feet on the ground. But I think if you're here and you already have some foundation, there are definitely opportunities just to get a sense of what industries and what kind of small to medium sized companies might be exploring that market, and get into them and become make your way into their international operations lead or China person and see what happens.
What about writing a book?
You could do that too.
Okay, terrific. We've got some more time. I've just been informed by the organizers that we can go up until the hours. And if any of our speakers have to drop, that's okay. But let's continue the conversation till the top of the hour. This is a question that is a bit broader than than what we're talking about today. But let's just toss this out there to see what people say, because the 20th Party Congress is coming up next year. And how important is that to American business? What are we thinking about? And Craig, maybe your thoughts on that, as we we seem to be in this prelude moment of when things are happening as prelude to that, and the potential for Xi to stay on for another 5, 10, 15, 100 years.
Well, I think it's a really interesting question, and there's no doubt that the 20th Party Congress, about a year from now, will be a watershed event. And I would expect quite a bit of choppy water between now and then. I think on the we've seen a welter of regulatory actions taken against a good number of industries that I think are at least somewhat in preparation or for the 20th Party Congress. I think that in addition to that, the Chinese economy is seeing a little bit of stress on the energy side, and particularly electricity supply. A lot of complex reasons for that, but electricity power producers don't like producing at a loss. And coal is in short supply right now and relatively expensive. A difficult issue for the Chinese to confront. But perhaps the most interesting issue at the macro level is real estate. And while I suspect that the Chinese government has the tools in place to be able to deal with the eventual bankruptcy of Evergrande and other issues within the real estate market, there are distortions in this market that are severe. And on one hand, the Chinese government finds the cost of real estate too high. New home buyers can't get in. But on the other hand, if it's lower, you're going to have a lot of angry home buyers. And so this creates it's a little bit of a dilemma. And again, I have full faith that the Chinese macroeconomists governing the economy are going to be able to get their way through this. But it's going to be choppy water for the next year for sure. And the 20th Party Congress and preparations for that and the political dynamic underlying that are part of the picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. A lot of young people are concerned about U.S.-China relations. They see a very murky future, and there's good reason to be concerned. I mean, we have seen U.S.-China relations plummet to the lowest point they've been in my adult lifetime, with the possible exception of post of 1989. But in many ways, the problems are deeper and more difficult to address than they were then. Having said that, this is a small planet. We've got to work with China. The Biden administration has indicated it doesn't want decoupling. It wants to worry about security issues and technology. But there's an awful lot of trade that's going on as we speak, and so there are complementarities. And but the domestic politics in both countries often lead us into dark corners, I think, and that's unfortunate. I hope that my own view going forward is that we need to do a better job on both sides to allow more voices to communicate across the Pacific to one another. And I will have a meeting with a senior Chinese diplomat in the next few weeks, and that's the point that I want to drive home. We need more communication because the stories are complicated now, and Americans need to understand it, and Chinese need to understand the challenges that we're facing as a country. So there's a lot of work for anybody in this field, young, old, or in between. The bridges that we have need to be sustained, repaired, rebuilt, and there's just so much work to do. And I think for me personally, this is my own the way I think about it. I've always felt that my China career, one way or another, whether it was doing business or running the National Committee on U.S. China relations or what I'm doing today as a consultant, it's all part of creating a durable fabric that allows benefit to all sides. And so it's a noble thing to have in mind, I think, and it should be an inspiration. I think it should be something that inspires people to continue pursuing what can sometimes be a very difficult career. And Joel has indicated how much elbow grease goes into the starting of these careers and maintenance. And it's not always easy, but boy, can it be rewarding. You saw the twinkle in Jonathan's eye as he thinks about his 35 years and time he spent there, and the interesting stories that there are today and will continue to be in China. So I just wanted to add that in that editorial comment because I've been doing this for a long time as well. Jonathan, the floor is open to you for any additional thoughts you have
No, I mean, I think that the back in the day, like Joel, I mean, I had to do the networking effort. It was China was something that one did because it was new. It was innovative. No one else had done it. You know, back in the 80s, you had a window of opportunity because nobody literally had been to China for decades at a time because of the Cultural Revolution and various other. We think we had a bad relationship now. Think about that. So so we're not there, as we said, that we have, you know, hundreds of thousands of people who have China experience. If not millions, and so it is a more competitive place. But by the same token, there are just that many more opportunities. So my challenge is to be really open-minded. You know, you might go with one idea and find out you're just doing something completely different. I think it's worthwhile having a balanced diet of talking to people in the U.S. about China and people in China about the U.S. to sort of get both sides of that conversation when you're looking for employment or anything, because there are always at least two, usually many sort of perspectives on what value you're actually bringing. So that's the opportunity. It's being comfortable with that. When I say unstructured environment, that's what I'm getting at, that really don't know where the next opportunity is going to be there. So as one of my friends who is a very rich person now would say, when hit rate is low, activity has to be high. So let's get out there and pitch.
Okay, that's terrific. Alan, any final thoughts from you? Advice for young people, Chinese and Americans?
Okay, for the Americans in specific, because once you're talking about China, you may think of Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong. But China is bigger than just Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong. So I believe there are more opportunities. And I don't know if it's less competitive, but definitely more opportunities in the second tier or maybe even third tier cities. So don't overlook that part of the China.
So that's great advice. And a lot of these cities now they're getting much more interesting and places to be, and you can add more value there. What about COVID? Let's talk about this, because this is a real problem for people trying to build a career with China. I mean, I haven't been to China for nearly 2 years. Now, Jonathan has a business there. He's got a home there. I don't. But what do you have any thoughts, Alan, on how quickly China changed its zero tolerance policy on COVID and make it a little easier for people to go back and forth?
I wish I know.
You wish you knew, yeah.
Yeah, but it's so true. It has been too long. And personally, I doubt if this policy is sustainable. But hopefully they're going to change very soon.
Yeah, other countries are making adjustments. I'm going to Singapore in November. And, they've got a method to deal with this. But there could be some infections that result from this conference, the Bloomberg New Economy Forum. There could be some infections that result, but you say, well, is it worth it? You can't just keep things shut down forever. And I do hope that there's once we get through the Olympics, which I think is to me, it's a marker, maybe things will start to change a little bit. Jonathan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just a thought. I mean, I think that maybe there's a mini scarcity effect here in the sense that if you can actually get to China, you will be a relatively scarce commodity when you come back to the U.S. So okay. You might want to think about this as an opportunity, sort of just find any way to get in. And, there can be creative things to think about. But it is I think the foreign community in Shanghai I've seen is down by about 40,000 people. So, it's about off by about 15-20%. Some of that is people not losing their jobs, like English teachers. So to be fair, a lot of it is family reunification policies and not allowing it. So I think that there is pressure now, and we should, therefore, if you're a believer in the long term, you buy on the dip, right? So I mean, this would be the opportunity to really double down on saying, well, how do I go the other way?
Okay, well, that's terrific, and I think you've convinced me to ask the ambassador for a special pass and get my butt back over there. I have a lot of friends I want to see. Craig, when's your next trip?
I don't know. I've given up predicting this. My guess is that it won't be till the 20th Party Congress. That is a year from now until the gates are open. And we are working on a project to try and get a green pass for business. But I'm not clear that that is going to work. I do think that on a risk-adjusted basis, we must have a green pass. We have to have a channel to get senior executives and senior business people, project managers and whatnot, investment decision makers back and forth. So we're working on a proposal there. But the Chinese government is radical on no spread of COVID. One understands that, but we are paying a very high price. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So in the meantime, however, my recommendation to young people is if you're connected to still connected at a university, there are a lot of groups of Chinese and Americans that have self-organized, at Stanford FACES, for example. There's the GCC, Harvard has, a lot of universities have programs. There are ways to plug in there. And the Asia Society has got some new thoughts on how to create avenues for interaction between young people. So stay tuned to this channel going forward. And I hope the Career Summit concludes successfully here today. And I want to thank our panelists. It's been great to get to know you better and to have a chance to introduce your expertise to our young audience. And to the audience, thank you for the great questions, and best of luck in your China careers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.